So I hope you find this view helpful. I think it's I find it very helpful. So then, going on to explain about then what's Father's motivation been, our true Father's motivation. From the start and for always, until it is done, Father's attitude is to take responsibility to liberate God. At first, Father thought that God was glorious, but he came to realize that God is so lonely, so misunderstood, so much in pain, so whipped and crying. And Father embraced God and said, I finally understood. And he cried for several days and months, trying to embrace and comfort God. No matter what hell I must face, I will liberate God from his miserable state. I will crown God and put him in his original position. So this is Father's understanding of Father's heart towards God. So I think, again, this is just so remarkable because so many points of view that Father has about God, so completely different from conventional understanding. And even the thought for some people that God might require our support or help, or that God could be in pain, or that God would need us in order to complete God, this would be such an almost crazy idea. But this is, in other words, we haven't really understood the position that God has been in at all. We haven't understood God as a relational God. And we didn't understand that God absolutely requires you and I. And our response to God is essential to God. So this is a very motivating thought, if we can catch it, not just as a thought, but something that touches our heart. So if I think for myself, I think that was always the most important thing I understood when I first heard the principle. Because of course the some very important moments in our spiritual life are the moments where we feel like, I've sort of referred to it a little bit before, it's like you hear the divine principle and you offer your life to God, and you sort of imagine in a way that if you offer your life to God, God's going to be good to you, and everything will be just the way you hope it will be, especially with the grace of God. So to understand, rather than it being like that, actually God can't determine things alone, but actually God's always dependent upon human responsibility. So God could determine himself and his attitude, like we explained before. God will never change in the face of misery and unhappiness and hurt and pain and other people's misconduct. God never changes. That God can take responsibility for, but to human beings and their conduct, God can't take responsibility for it. So reality is, we also meet situations in which we feel betrayed or hurt or deeply disappointed, or that we didn't get what we imagined we would get, as it were. And that's really important in those moments, that you realize that God needs us. I think that was the most important thing for me, as I said, when I met those moments when, in my religious life, having committed myself, I nonetheless found myself in very painful circumstances, and could even have reached the point of blaming God, or feeling I'd been deceived or mistreated or tricked, or not got what I expected to get, or somehow exploited even, or abused even. Do you know that type of feeling? Have you ever had that sort of feeling? Where you put your whole life on the line and then ended up somehow you didn't get what you thought you were going to get. And of course sometimes you can identify the person who's responsible in your mind, in your heart, and if it gets difficult enough, you might identify ultimately God and feel a lot of blame and this isn't what I expected, God. I didn't think this was the deal. I thought I'd put my life in your hands and then everything would be all right. So I don't know how you... When I read this, it also makes me think about, yes, how I thought about God, but even also how I thought about Christ, or how I thought about Father. You know, I don't know. I remember I had the privilege for one period to be on a workshop where Reverend Wonpil Kim was in Britain at that time, and he had a series of morning services, and he was explaining about Father's life and giving internal guidance from it. It's in the little book, Father's Course in Our Life of Faith, those morning sermons, and he was telling us about Father's time in Hungnam, sorry, not Hungnam, but Pyongyang, when Father went there to, cross the border in 1946 and went to Pyongyang and was teaching there. And Father, as I mentioned before, had this very strong revelation within 7 years from 45 that a significant foundation would be made. Korea would be one nation. Father would be in an extremely influential position, and that influence would reach out from Korea to America and from America to the United Nations, and Father would be playing such a key role for peace in the world and the coming of the kingdom. And those revelations were also confirmed, just like Mary's revelation when she walked into Zechariah's house. Those revelations were also confirmed by many spiritual women, very deep spiritual women, who came from Christian denominations and confirmed it to Father. So Wonpil Kim asked us in one morning service, he said, how do you think it was for Father when he got sentenced to 5 years forced labour in Hungnam? Do you think that was okay for Father, or do you think that wasn't okay? So I put my hand up for okay. Because I thought, Father, obviously Father made it through, right? And I presumed it was okay, but he explained it wasn't okay at all. Because Father believed God's revelation. He believed God's revelation, so to suddenly find out that it looks like God's revelation isn't going to happen, because he's going to be in a forced labour camp, and what can he do there to complete this providence? Then, of course, that was very, very difficult for Father, he described. But Father digested it. How did Father digest it? Because he did what God did. God was the broken-hearted God, but he forgot his own feelings, thinking about us, right? So what can we do? What can Tim Miller do when he's feeling blinking miserable? And he could lay it at God's door, or lay it at the door of other people who are supposed to be even my fellows of faith, or even the people who are responsible for me, or whatever it is, and I can lay it at people's door. What do I do? What can I do? I have to remember God and how it is for God. And that's what Father said, isn't it? He said in the prison lots of times, I didn't pray. Because I was fearful if I did, I might say something that would make God even more unhappy. So I sang a song instead. I sang Song of the Spring Breeze. And I tried to tell God that one day the winter would be over and the spring would come. And I couldn't tell God about my suffering, because God already knows about it, and he would... I don't want to create more pain for God. So I think this is a very, very key moment in our life of faith, because somehow we are still so much in need of love, and we want to offer our lives to God, but we want also to be happy, of course. That's God-given, right? To want to be happy. All the hands up, everybody wants to be miserable and unhappy. We understand this from the introduction of the Divine Principle. Everybody's in search of happiness and actually seeking to avoid misfortune. So, but how? How can we keep going? It's simple. It's a reciprocal relationship. We need God, but God needs us. And it's the people who, anyhow, Father understood very profoundly God's circumstance, and surely that was also Father's, mission starting point. It was this experience, 1935 Easter Day, and feeling God's tears. Father said something like, through Jesus, God's tears came and they entered in him, and they flowed through his veins and through his body. And he felt all of God's tears, and he cried and he cried and he cried. So this sort of understanding, and then, but also, of course, there's a starting point, such that Father was asked, Jesus, will you take the mission? Will you do the mission? Will you complete the mission? How can you possibly say yes without being desperately insincere? Because how can you know if you'll complete the mission? You cannot know, so you cannot promise. But then third time, Father says yes. Why on earth would he say yes? The only reason to say yes is because his heart is so moved. He doesn't know how to keep the promise, just he knows he has to make it. But doesn't know what to do, doesn't know what needs to be done, doesn't know why it's all gone wrong, doesn't fully understand everything yet. And then 10-year search to really discover everything and find out. And so, Father understood what would resolve the situation for God. So what will resolve the situation for God? Which action will finalize the restoration of providence, in a sense? What do you think? What's he got to do? When he understood, what's he got to do? There's a lot of answers to that. So 20 answers in Europe. But of course, simply speaking, he has to make the day, which would have been the celebration day. Do you understand? He has to find Eve. He has to become the body that God can wear. And he has to sow the seed of God into the egg of Eve and make Foundation Day. That's what finishes the process and creates a new beginning. Of course, it doesn't mean that everything will belong to the new beginning, right? Does it?
Starting point.
Because everything came from the fallen lineage, right? So it all has to be reborn, right? Everything has to be reborn. But if you don't have the place through which to be reborn, there's no way to be reborn, right? So Father Mother had to make the place. And that's what Foundation Day is all about. It's the absolute completion of completions, the perfection of completion, the finalization of making that place, which is not God's responsibility, right? That's human responsibility. So Reverend Yu's lectures, they're to do with the completion of the portion of human responsibility. That's what they're doing with. So true parents completed their portion of responsibility on Foundation Day. So of course that means everything's done, right?
No.
What do you think?
No. Starting point.
No, everything's not done. But we've got a place through which to be reborn, right? The place exists, so then from that everything has to be reborn. So, of course we come to Foundation Day and who experienced being reborn here already? Anybody experienced being reborn? In some level, I'm sure we all experienced being reborn, right? But maybe it wasn't everything. I remember the day I was in Lancaster Gate. I was not in Tea's blessing. I was in the next engagement, right? Which was 1978 in September. I remember being in the back of the room and Father was matching. And I was sitting there on the floor thinking, how do I get myself to the place that I should be in? This significant moment in my life. How do I get myself to the place where I just only want what God wants and I don't want anything for myself? And I did my utmost to get to that place, and I felt I got there, at least in that moment. And then Father, that's the moment Father pointed at me. That was a good moment, right? But it didn't become sustained through the whole of the rest of my life. Do you understand? There are other moments which were very different, but not as good for me. And not my responsibility wasn't as good as it was in that moment. But I remember that moment. And that gives me also hope that it's possible to get there. It's possible to be there. I haven't been there all the time. So we want Foundation Day to be like that too. But I suspect, I don't know, I don't want to be pessimistic. I don't mean it like that. I mean to somehow be realistic. I suspect, in a sense, I need to be born again every day, if you see what I mean. Every hour, But it's somehow, this is a very fundamental and important attitude. And I think probably that some of the most important moments to be born again was when it could have been my death.
Yeah.
Do you understand what I mean? It's when you got struck. And all your hopes and dreams, you could believe in a moment, they came to nothing. And your life was nothing. Think of Jesus on the cross, right? My God, why have you forsaken me? It seems like it came to nothing. And then you forget that it came to nothing, and you just think of God. And then resurrection, do you understand? Rebirth, new beginning, something. This is also very important. Do you know what I mean? Very important to refresh ourselves with this type of thinking, I think, because we all have disappointments, hurts, pains, not just something that happened 10 years ago or 2 days ago or 5 years ago, but we have them in our lives. We're dealing with them. We're trying to deal with them. How are we going to deal with them? Actually, Father's answer is very simple. I think maybe it's in the next slide, so I better not preempt it. Not sure, but I'll carry on, otherwise I'm going to use my time completely. True Father, I want to become the friend of the broken-hearted God and to be his companion. This is it. The root, what I wanted to refer to, the root of solving human problems is to liberate God. That is human responsibility. We made the problem. Out of his love for God, many times, True Father had to overcome his human feelings. That's the point I want to make. So, Father's very clear. We'll never resolve our problems until we resolve God's problem. Because Father got to understand what got lost at the time of the fall, and then he understood what has to be recovered. So he's been trying to recover Foundation Day. He's been trying to make the true parents in the most perfected and completed way that they can be made. So of course true parents already are true parents, right? They're already true parents in 1960, or maybe Father already before that had married before, right? I mean, that wasn't true parents because Providence wasn't at the right moment, but he had a wife and even had a child. And, you know, how many times has Father met the moment of betrayal? You know, even that poem he wrote, right? 15 years old. You know, am I right to love when I'm betrayed? Am I right to believe when I'm deceived? You know, should I stop believing? Should I stop loving? No, can't do it. Otherwise all is lost. God has lost it all. So we can't let God lose. So that's Father's understanding. I must not let my God lose. And that's what kept Father going through all the... Nobody met more bitter disappointment, and nobody has higher hopes. Do you understand? If you have high hopes, on one level it's much easier to be hurt and disappointed, isn't it? If you're not hoping for anything, then hey, it doesn't work out, then you're not going to be disappointed. But if you're always having high hopes to give God hope and to give people like us hope, because Father was always giving us hope, right? It was sometimes not easy to keep hope. So if you're doing that, then in a sense the more easy to be disappointed. But Father managed to find his way through. How? So I don't think we should all become cynics, right? And stop having hopes. Because God has hope. The greatest optimist of all is God. So we have to be hopeful too. But how do you keep that? You have to find a way to keep that. And, you know, that's very important. Father understood, if we don't solve God's problems, we'll never solve our own problems. So many times, you know, of course, ideally, no question about it, Father should be looking after Mother and investing in his children. Isn't that what a family's supposed to be? You know, true family. You love your wife as a husband, and you look after your children, and you devote yourselves to them, and you make them happy, and that's obviously what heaven's about, right? But many times Father wasn't in a position to do that. Out of his love for God, many times true Father had to overcome his own human feelings, because he was placed in a circumstance where, you know, when his first wife arrived at the door of the shack on the hillside in Busan, made from the stones and the mud and the American packing, you know, ration box cases, and his first wife, Mrs. Che, arrives at the door with a 7-year-old boy who hasn't seen since he was 40 days old. That's a moment, right? That's an incredible moment. You know, what do you do in that moment? You know, what he knew he couldn't do is he can't abandon solving God's problem. He has to solve God's problem. If he abandons solving God's problem to you know, take care of his personal circumstances in that moment, then God's providence could be lost, and all he knows and understands might not be able to bring the solution. So many times, you know, Father, on another occasion, you know, Father's mother arrives at Hongnan with the, you know, the quilted clothing and the rice powder, and gives it to Father, and Father gives it away to other people in front of her. And then she's just weeping. Why don't you preserve your life? Why are you behaving this crazy way? But he understands what he has to do, right? if I can't solve God's problem, nobody's problem will be solved. Don't you know those moments in your life where someone who loves you says to you, please do this, and you're torn between doing what you know God needs you to do and doing what someone you love is asking of you to do. We nearly all went through that to join our movement in the first place, because of parents or husbands or wives or boyfriends or girlfriends or friends or whatever it was, and they wanted us and God wanted us, and we had to choose who was going to get us. And when we made those decisions, I think what we realized was, well, if I do what my parents want me to do right now and I abandon God, no one's going to be happy in the end. It's not going to work out. I've got to solve God's problem. So Father understood that. So who are Father's children in that sense? What's Foundation Day? Foundation Day is to be the day to be reborn in the direct lineage of the God of night and day. That's what it is. So to be the true children, preparing to be, part of that direct lineage, we have to understand this same heart that Father understands, and discuss and digest our own pain, and want to liberate true parents. This is actually our course. So I thought Father was glorious. I thought it wouldn't bother Father when he got sentenced to 5 years in the forced labour camp. But it bothered Father profoundly. Because Father's also, whipped and hurt and lonely and misunderstood and very difficult circumstance. Although he's so optimistic, so hopeful, so bright, so encouraging, actually life has been very, very, very bitter. So if I don't know that, and I just think, some other way. I remember I got a chance to go to Korea on one holy day, I think 2002 or something, and I arrived a bit late at the Little Angels Performing Arts Auditorium, and I went up, because coming from overseas, they treat you very nicely in Korea. They put me in the circle, the circle place, up the balcony, above the stage, and true parents sitting in the front of the balcony. I was standing at the back, there wasn't a seat anymore. True parents sitting in the middle, true children either side of them. All beautiful, beautiful clothing. Lovely, lovely dresses for the women, and beautiful suits for the men. Big flowers here, looking so majestic, There's me in the back thinking, how far away am I from this, and how glorious in a sense they are. And then it comes to the part of the performance where some of the true children go down to perform, and I see some of the front row, looking over the balcony, go down, and then it comes on the stage. And then Father's youngest son, Kyungjin, comes on the stage. He says, I want to sing a song. I want to sing a song for my brother. This is his 1 year older brother, Yoongjin, who just went to the spirit world in the previous year. I want to sing a song for my brother. And he sang this Eric Clapton song, Tears of Heaven. If I meet you in heaven, will you know my name? Eric Clapton wrote that song after his 4-year-old son fell out of a building and died. Very similar circumstance, right? Yoongjin fell out of the building and died. If I meet you in heaven, will you know my name? And then, it's dark. This looked like a very nice family sitting in the front, do you understand? But this isn't not quite such a comfortable place to be as it maybe looks if you just look at it superficially. And then several other true children sang a song, but then another person Hyojin came to sing a song. And of course, throughout the latter part of the 1990s, Hyojin's life was a disaster, and everybody got to hear something about it, right? And as he stood there and performed in his ever-deepening voice, as he got older, more mature, and as he sang there, I thought if I was him, I wouldn't be standing on the stage singing in front of brothers and sisters. I'd be a million miles away, hiding in a cave. Do you understand? I wouldn't want anybody to see me, and I wouldn't want to see anybody. Can you imagine how... But he's there. Why is he there? Not because it's comfortable to be there, but because his heart to true parents. It may have done all sorts of junk, but still he has this, in the end, he got this heart, and he's trying to find his way, and he's trying to love them. And then I thought, this family looks very nice, but actually it's not quite so simple. And then I think, but, if anybody deserves to have a nice life, if anybody did something for God and deserves to be treated well and have all the good stuff, more than me, right? Much more than me. It's them, but actually they're not getting it. How's that? What sort of God is that? Someone gives their whole life for you and you don't get the good stuff. What sort of God is that? It's because God isn't in charge. Do you understand? God can't determine the outcome. All God can do is love the enemy. There's nothing else to do. This is a very important thing to catch. Otherwise you get caught by Satan. Do you understand? I get caught by Satan. And I become the same way the archangel. I lose my confidence in God. God, do you really love me? I thought when I said I'd give my life to you, I'd be a happy man. I thought when you gave me that wife, it would all be just super, But sometimes it's not super. I thought when you gave me that husband, it would just all be fantastic. I thought when those children were born, everything would just be great. But actually, it's not quite like that sometimes. So, hey, this is a lousy deal, isn't it? Mother of James and John, when you get to your throne, please let my son sit on that side and that son sit on the other side. That's the expectation, do you understand? And then, the Son of Man comes not to sit on a throne, but to be in a difficult place. That wasn't the deal when I left my fishing net. That wasn't the deal. What sort of deal is that? That doesn't sound right. So, we can't hold, God has held his position. Father has held his position despite every bit of disappointment, every deception, every betrayal. So, we've got to try and, even in this next 20 days or whatever it is until Foundation Day, we have to try and capture all that stuff, and we have to turn it from being the way that Satan might take me into the way that I have something to give, something to offer to God, because I joined in the payment. I helped pay the price. That's my honour. So this is very, very important type of attitude. And then, we turn the bad things into things we're grateful to God for. And it becomes our privilege. And, that's absolutely defeating Satan. Do you understand? Because that's what Satan couldn't do. So that's what we're coming on to next. Anyhow, Father's plea to God, please God, said somebody to this earth every 100 years who can love you more than me. I'm sure he'd want, that's the quote that we got, but I'm sure Father would want every day, every minute, if possible, such a person. So coming back then to that fall scenario, looking at box number 1 on the top right there, Lucifer was the central figure of millions of angels and the whole incorporeal world, the whole spiritual world, receiving a lot of love from God. Then God began to create the corporeal world. And the archangel realized, that's not for me. That's not for me because I'm not corporeal. That's not for me. And then look at box number 2. The beautiful creation is for corporeal Adam. Means, Adam has physical as well as spiritual existence. Understanding corporeal and corporeal. Eve, the last creation. What does that mean, Eve, the last creation? It means, for God, this is the most precious. There's nothing more precious than woman. Actually, more correctly, God didn't think of human beings before he made everything. He thought of Eve. That's what he thought of. Not man and woman. God thought of Eve. God designed Eve first and designed man for the sake of woman. Designed man so that he could wear him and make love to Eve. That's what God did. So God, the pinnacle of God's creation, the ultimate, source of inspiration for making everything else is woman. And God made men just so that he could wear them and sow his seed in Eve. So, God made that. And now, who was Eve for? Eve wasn't for the archangel, Eve was for Adam. She's also for Adam. She's going to be his wife. She's going to belong to his lineage. They're going to make together God's lineage. Even Adam will be the ruler over the incorporeal world, the spiritual world, as well as the corporeal world. So, hey, it's all everything I participated with God in making, I'm not going to get any of it. It's all going to this other guy who just turned up 5 minutes ago. How's that possible? How is that possible, for goodness sake? So Jesus tried to explain about it. The parable of the workers in the vineyard. The workers in the vineyard, right? Someone comes the crack of dawn and pledges themselves to work and sweat all day long for, whatever it was, £20 or something. And they agree very happily, they're happy to have any sort of work. But then someone else comes along at lunchtime and they get 20 quid as well at the end of the day. And someone else comes 1 hour before finish time. And lo and behold, when the boss is paying them all at the end of the day, he gets £20 too. What sort of way is that to have to be there from the beginning? Hey! What's that? So we know about that, right? We know about, how come we know about that? Jealousy, lack of love, all that stuff. How do we know about that? That's our lineage. That's our nature. So we know all about that. Exactly, we know about those feelings. So, through the fall, Satan made Eve his wife. Eve seduced Adam and made him Satan's son. Right? Of course, in other words, it means Adam became the body that not God wore, but Satan wore Adam and sowed his seed in Eve. Right? That's how it worked out. Because what's it to do with? It's to do with motivation. It's to do with the heart lies behind what happened. What happens in this interaction. So that's how. And then Satan not only created his son through Eve, but actually through Adam and Eve, he created his lineage. Because, let's face it, certainly Satan then took on Adam. In reality, yes, down human history, men did so many dreadful things to women. That's reality. So fallen Adam is Satan's son, the substantial body of Satan. He sowed Satan's seed in Eve. Therefore, all fallen men belong to Satan's blood lineage and are in the position of the archangel. They don't have any right to have children or any right to have property because they're not human beings. They're archangels, right? That's Father's explanation. They lost their rights as human beings. They became archangels instead. So good archangels, what did they do? Good archangels understood, I don't have right to have a wife. I don't have right to have a child. So they took a vow of what? Celibacy. And good archangels understood, I don't have the right to own anything. So they took a vow of poverty. And they understood, we've been so disobedient to God, we've so much broken God's heart. What do? We take a vow of obedience. And who are we obeying? God, of course, but who's God? God's Mother Superior, God's Abbot, God's... Do you understand? Because, anyhow, God needs somebody that's going to tell you what to do, otherwise how can you be a God? It's not possible. So this is how it was meant to be. Adam would be the substantial God, in terms of God's, masculine aspect. But this is the order, do you understand? That's the order within God. It goes shimjum to subject, to object, give and take action, result. That's how it works inside God, do you understand? So God needs Adam first, because he needs a subjective being, through whose body he can love God's object partner, do you understand? So Adam is the one who God wears as his clothes, wears as his body. And then Eve is the wife that God is longing to lay beside, and to love. And then the children, they're God's children. Of course they're God's children. They're God's children in the most profound sense, because, it is God living within Adam who sows his seed. It is the invisible Father God and Mother God who had love with one another within the nature of God as an expression of God's shimjum that brought forth the whole creation. That's the way that God, within his own being, do you understand? God had to conceive it all. What's the conception invisibly within God? That is to do with God's, centering on the Shimjung, God's different dual characteristics interacting with one another. That's what it is. So then that's manifested substantially in Adam and Eve. And those children are not just the children of Adam and Eve. They're even more deeply than that. They're the children of God who lies behind the very existence of Adam and Eve. The God of the night that lies behind the God of the day. So they would all have been. Who would Cain have been? He would be the eldest son, right? He would inherit Adam's heart, and he would bring that into the family, and he would, pass that to his younger brothers and sisters, and so on. So this would be the place for the substantiation of true love, true life, true lineage. And this would make that whole cosmos filled with God's blood lineage. It means families, families, families and families and families and families, where God would taste, conjugal love and parental love and brothers and sisters love and children's love, but in endless variety. No one conjugal relationship would be exactly the same taste, flavor, color. Everything would be unique. And God would it would just multiply, and God would experience all this incredible beauty. Taste it and see it and feel it and hear it through his children. But instead, Adam became the substantial Satan. And Satan wore Adam as his body, and sowed his seed in Eve. She became his wife. So of course Eve's in two places, do you understand? She's on this side. There's Satan, right? Here's Eve, and there's Adam. Eve gave birth to Adam, do you understand? That's fallen Adam. And then she became his wife too. Do you understand? She's in two places. She's his mother and his wife. Think about restoration and the blessing. You understand about restoration and the blessing, right? Sister's position. Children, Satan's children. And, that's why, of course, Cain is firstborn, belongs to Satan, absolutely. Abel, who's Abel? He's the one who's, further away from Satan, in a sense. So this multiplied Satan's love, life, and lineage, and expanded Satan's blood lineage. So key point there is blood lineage. This is the crucial point. And that's why the value and importance of the true parent. So we had Professor O sharing some of Father's words. He explained it's completely different. Adam, Jesus and Father, they're completely different from any human being because they're original. Do you understand? Adam, Jesus and Father, they're directly from God. They're directly, Jesus, only begotten Son of God, right? That's what it says in the scripture. They're not belonging to that lineage of Satan, do you understand? Don't have any taint of it. So it means direct, it's direct. So even while Adam and Eve were growing up, it's like, he explained God can speak to Adam or Jesus or Father, just it's not spoken, it's like direct. But when they teaching someone else, they have to put it into words. But God is direct, it's just direct. It's different, completely different type of experience. So, most important point in the restoration position, of course, is the first step of the restoration position is God needs a body to wear. Otherwise, he's not going anyplace. Do you understand? So you need Adam first. So who were they? There was Jesus, there's Father. Very special position. But then, of course, what does Father need? Of course, now it's done, isn't it? The Messiah's born, then the providence is over, right? Messiah needs... Who does Messiah need more than anything else? Messiah needs a bride. A bride. Needs Eve. Adam needs Eve. Otherwise... So that's what Foundation Day is about. You see, so Foundation Day is about Mother's course in a sense, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because, Father's the body that can be worn. But Mother has to reach a certain level. And what's Mother's course about? I suppose it's really our course. Do you understand? Because Mother's the first spiritual child. Or when I think it was Professor O was explaining to us, when the helicopter accident took place, when Father was in the helicopter with his grandchildren, Father said 3 generations nearly perished. But actually there was only father and mother and the grandchildren. So where's the 3 generations? There's only grandparents and grandchildren. But he said actually from father's point of view, mother is 2nd generation. Because father gave birth to mother. Father gave birth to mother. So she's the first. She's leading the way for all of us. That's reality. Do you understand? We're all following her footsteps. So when we study mother's course, on some level we're studying our course. And who has to lead? On a certain level, woman has to lead. Do you understand? On a certain level, connecting to that because, Eve was the mother of Adam and then the wife of Adam. So who are men? When we go to the restoration course later, you find that men are they're just rubbish. They should be thrown away. That's Father's explanation. Men are rubbish, they should be thrown away. There's only one man. That's Adam. Do you understand? Or that's Jesus. Or that's Father. There's no other men. All other men are they're fallen. There's no restoration for them. It's just thrown them away. And also they're Father's enemy. They're the Lord's enemy. Because they're the ones who tried to kill him. But what does Father do? Father's looking to give his enemy what he couldn't have himself. Do you understand? Yeah. Father didn't have a nice family, actually. Didn't have like that. But Father wants us, men, you and I, to have a nicer family, or our children a nicer one, or our children's children a nicer one. Because that's the nature of Father. Do you understand? So he found a way, Father says Father found a way to recycle men. so that women can have a husband, otherwise they can't have one, because there's only one Adam, right? So you can't all have one Adam, right? So there's a recycling method in men, right? But this means there's a way to change our blood lineage. So, before the fall, Adam's mind and body were having good give and take action. In other words, he's growing. He's growing. How do you grow? It's through the give and take action between mind and body, right? Following the principle, of course, and through following the principle, developing your heart and getting closer and closer to God. Human beings have the memory of living with God, and they want to return to that experience. Therefore, we have idealism or optimism or belief in goodness. Utopian movements. What's the ultimate utopian movement? It is the true family. It is. Who's the ultimate utopian? It's the Christ. It's the Lord. And it's God behind him, of course, who still absolutely believes in his purpose of creation. So what is it saying? It means that inside you and I, there's Tim Miller original. Do you understand? Not inside you, but inside me, right? There's Tim Miller original. This is the me before 16, as it were. Or, as Father now defined even more precisely, before 14. Because it's before the commandment. That's not even before the fall, which is here, right? But before the commandment. So Father indicated that approximately 2 years before the fall, God gave the commandment. It means something's already not right in the garden. Do you understand? So you have to say something. Because you can see something could go wrong. So you give a direction. So before the commandment, everything is just the voice of God. There isn't anything else. And everything's original. So, there's something inside me that's original. So when I heard the divine principle, I think the same for you. How did I know it was true? I didn't know from my intellect. I didn't understand it. I didn't know it. How did I know? It was in my original nature that I knew. That's how I knew that this is true. And that's how I couldn't get away. Well, I could get away, but if I got away, what would I be doing? I'd be denying the best thing inside of me. I'd be killing myself. And then that's the bit Satan wants to kill, do you understand? If he can get that bit, then that's finished, do you understand? If he can make me betray myself, my goodness. So if you get to that point where you start to think about your spiritual life, it all brought me into misery, and God has cheated me and abused me and exploited me, that's to kill the original you. Don't get it. Don't allow it to be killed. Do you understand? Don't ever let it be killed. That's what Satan wants to kill. So that lies within us, and we need, it's that part of us that recognizes God. But unfortunately, the fall took place, and then the individual, the family, tribe, race, nation, world, cosmos all developed out of the fall. This was under Satan's dominion. 6,000 years again, another here we were having questions about millions of years last lecture, now we've got 6,000. Anyhow, it's a long time, right? It's biblical years, of course. Adam in the realm of Satan's dominion and Satan's blood lineage developing. So, results of the fall. It's interesting to look at the results of the fall in this way. So we just looked at the fall from a very internal point of view, in terms of the change of blood lineage. Now we're going to look at the results of the fall from a different perspective than one we usually use, from the perspective of the four great realms of heart, or the loss of the four great realms of heart. If Adam had not fallen, he would have achieved the four great realms of heart, the three great blessings, the purpose of creation, eternal happiness. And that would have just multiplied. In other words, the tradition would have been established, it would have been substantiated. We understand even that actually it really takes 3 generations to complete, right? So we need Adam and Eve's children grow up, maybe even... Anyhow, certainly when they've had their children, the pattern is established. And then it has power to just grow and develop. So the first heart, or Shimjun, children's love. So because of the fall, we lost children's love. What does it mean? It means we lost our identity as the children of God, and we lost God. So we don't know who our parents are. We lost God. We could not know God. We lost the warm embrace of our parents. We lost that sense that, of being beloved by our parents, of being in the warm embrace of our parents all the time. We couldn't touch God. We couldn't hear the heartbeat of God. So he relates that, Father relates that. I had the opportunity for a while to work professionally with children and families, and needed to study child development. So when you study child development, one of the most critical points of child development is the relationship between, generally speaking, mother and baby. It's, they say, primary caregiver. That's the sort of language they use. But this is very, very important. What we say is that the mother bonds with her child. That's the words they use, bonds. So that's why if you have a premature baby and they're in an incubator and you can't be with them because they need to be in that special environment the first couple of months or something, then it's difficult to bond. Because to bond, the child should be suckling at your breast, the child should be in your arms, the child should be... And then the mother bonds to the child. And then because the mother bonds to the child, then the mother is not just feeding the baby or changing the baby or taking care of the baby, the mother is loving the baby. Do you understand? Feeding is just love. It's just loving. It's not feeding. Do you understand? It is feeding, but it isn't only feeding. What's happening here is love is happening. And then from the child's side, the terminology they use technically is the child becomes attached to the mother. The mother bonds with the child, and the child becomes attached to the mother. And it's that attachment which is critically important to one's sense of identity and one's sense of security and one's sense of value. So when I was involved in looking after very troubled children, one of the most important theories was the attachment theory. It's those children are not attached. Why they're not attached many times, could maybe sometimes anyhow, one root cause was that the mothers couldn't bond for their reasons. And then the child couldn't attach, and then very, very difficult because they don't know. They're not in the secure love embrace of mum. Mum and dad, of course. Dad is also involved in some level, but and then life is difficult because of that. So we should be able to hear the heartbeat of God, like you do in your mother's womb. You already hear your mother's heartbeat, and you get born, and then you're laid on your mother's breast, and you hear her heartbeat again, and you're safe. You're safe, right? And then this in this child development theory, when you're secure, when you get to able to walk and crawl and things, you start going away from mum. But you don't go so far, because you want to get back again, right? And as you develop more, you go further and further and further. And also that expresses itself in your ability to relate freely and confidently to other people. So, if you don't know that God loves you, and if you don't know you're the beloved son and daughter of God, then actually you don't have any starting place to build any other relationships. What does it mean? It means every relationship you embark upon, you're looking for what you don't have. But when you embark on a relationship, what should be your motivation? It should be for the sake of
The other.
the other, God and the other, right? But because you didn't get, then you're in search of what you didn't get, right? So when you're embarking on a relationship, so of course I imagine my wife would be just a continual source of love, would be a continual source of love. I mean, maybe I wasn't that stupid. But I'm not being rude. I'm not being rude about my wife. Please don't misunderstand me. I'm not being rude. But we're all fallen people. We're all very messed up. It's reality, Well, maybe with some that's a bit less messed up than others, but fundamentally that's our reality. But who am I in search of? Who am I in search of? When Jack gave last weekend the explanation about the family pledge, right? We're in search of our
Original homeland.
Homeland. Where's our homeland?
The heart of
Korea.
God.
Korea, right?
No.
Yes? No?
No.
Yeah. On a level it is. On a national level it is. But then we've got a deeper homeland. What's my homeland?
My wife.
Cheongryuk.
Yeah? Well, yeah. But where does Cheongryuk start?
My love. My wife.
My mum and dad. My place my father and mother met in love. But that shouldn't be the place my father and mother met in love alone. That should be the place where the God of night met the God of day, in the place my father and mother made love. So I'm not the son of my father and mother alone. I'm absolutely the son of God. Do you understand? That's the way it's supposed to be. That's the identity that comes from lineage. So we lost it. So then we lost ourselves. So if you work with kids who are separated from their parents, it's a very tricky business. Sometimes we would take those children they were living with other people, do you understand? They couldn't live with their parents for whatever reason. But sometimes those parents had a right to visit them once a month, once a week, twice a week. And then you take the children for contact. It was called contact. You take the children for contact with their actual parents, and then what happens afterwards? They throw a dirty great wobbler. Do you understand? That's my funny English. In other words, they're extremely upset, generally speaking, because mum and dad is mum and dad. Do you understand? It doesn't matter if they abused you. Doesn't matter if they neglected you. Mum and dad is mum and dad. Do you understand? And you want them to be what they should be. And you meet them, and then you go back to the other ones, and then it's very, very difficult for the substitute parents to bring the children to the parents. It's not a simple matter at all. And of course, what you want, of course, is that the parents will be extremely mature and behave correctly, and then it won't make a problem. But that's a lot to ask, isn't it? Because why aren't the children with them in the first place? So you understand what I'm talking about. On another level, where does all of this philosophy come from? Deism. God made the world and then let it be, and it's just a mechanism. God isn't personally relating to it at all. Atheism, there isn't a God anyhow. Skepticism, no capacity to understand about God and idealism and so on. Where does that all come from? It's because we lost our parents, so we don't know. So, where is that coming from? Where is all this rebellion against God and against religion? And why do people who are atheistic sometimes sound so like religious people in their fundamentalism or their refusal to accept the possibility of something which maybe we can't prove, but they obviously don't really care whether you can disprove. They absolutely don't want it, right? Why don't they want it? Why do you feel, Dad and Mum, you're not my dad and Mum? Why do you feel, I wish you were dead, my parents? Why do you feel, I don't like you, Dad, I don't like you, Mum? Why do you feel resentment? So you wish they didn't exist. Why do you feel that? Where does that come from? Because you're hurt, because you felt you weren't loved, because I remember when I was a little boy, I don't know, I can't even remember what it was they denied me, but I didn't get what I wanted. And I cried my eyes out and I banged my fists on the floor and I went up to my bedroom and I slammed the door and and I got the lead pencil and I made my fingers black and I put it all over my eyes, so I go down again and they show them how they hurt me. Show them how they hurt me. Do you understand? Because I hadn't been loved. Because of course, I mean, I'm sure they did love me, but I felt I hadn't been loved. Do you understand? So we know about all these feelings. Do you understand? This is a very profound matter. We don't know that we belong to God. So we lost ourselves. We lost ourselves. We lost our purpose, our value. And then out of that, what happens? You don't know your purpose, you don't know your value. It means every relationship you're entering, you're going in to get something. So if you're going in to get something, whether you mean it or not, what are you going to do? Inevitably, to some degree, you're exploiting the other person. Do you understand? Inevitably, to some degree, it's like that. And if you don't know that you're precious to God, then you certainly don't know other people are precious to God. So if someone's not precious to God and you're not precious to God, then if you feel bad, what can you do? You can bang them in the face, you can rape them, you can abuse them, you can cheat them, you can lie to them, you can mistreat them, you can hate them, you can blame them for everything because they're a different class, a different race, a different language, a different nation. You can blame them for everything, and you can kill them, and you can chop them in pieces, and you can do all sorts of horrible things to them because they don't have any value anyhow, and more importantly, because you don't, and you're angry, and you're upset, and you're not loved. So you're going to hurt somebody because you're hurting, right? So it all comes from there, right? Cruelty, abuse, discrimination, racism, suicide, addiction, trying to drug myself up so I don't feel miserable all the time, right? It all comes from there. It all comes from the loss of the first heart. And then what's the second heart? Second heart, brother and sister's love. So we lost our common parent. So we're not brothers and sisters. We're cut from God, so we're cut from each other. We can't feel the other person's pain, we're indifferent. Our conscience isn't operating. This applies, of course, on the individual level. Here's Tim, here's Neil, here's Tony, here's Taya, here's Tom, it's on the individual level, but also it's between peoples and tribes and nations, and we don't really care about one another from our worst nature, do you understand? So we belong to the European Union, but fundamentally, when we're negotiating, what are we negotiating for? We're negotiating for the national interest, right? So, what's our concern? If by being part of the European Union we were being taken advantage of, asked to give more than we get, this is not a good deal, right? We have to protect the national interest, right? So that explains why it's difficult, not just between individuals, it's difficult between families and clans and tribes and nations, and because those are the other guys. Those are the other guys. They're not us. So we don't care about them because we're not so happy ourselves. We're hurting a bit, so why should we? So then you get things like, hopefully you get religious ethic, right? And then you belong to the Ummah, or the Muslim nation, or you belong to Buddhism, and you're part of a Buddhist that goes beyond the nation. Do you understand? You're part of Christendom, and you're part of the family of Christians, and it goes beyond. Doesn't matter if the other one's black or yellow or white or green, or it doesn't matter what they are, because they're all. But that's not easy to practice, right? But sometimes it worked. When it was best expressed, it worked. So, there's Mother Teresa, right? She's an Albanian ethnic woman, right? But then she's beloved of, brown Hindu people in India. Why is she beloved? Because she loved them. It didn't make any difference to them that they weren't the same religion as her, same class as her, same language as her, same ethnicity as her. They were the body of Christ. So she picked them up off the street, stinking and, being eaten by insects and whatever. But she picked them up and she looked after them because they're the body of Christ. But when you lose that sense of the value of other human beings, then you can do nasty things, right? So isn't it unbelievable? Isn't it unbelievable to find out that, British soldiers went to Iraq and tortured people? Isn't it almost unbelievable? How could we have done such a thing? Somehow, justified it in themselves and did it. Do you understand? Kenyan Kenyan veterans of the Mau Mau resurrection and whatever it was, and all these stories about how they were tortured. They were tortured, for goodness sakes. Who can believe it? You know, how could people do that to other people? But they're doing it all the time. You know, not just they're doing it. Do you understand? We're doing it. You know, how many people did I torture yesterday? Don't remember torturing anybody yesterday. But do you understand what I mean? I'm not mean I tortured somebody in the sense of what happened in some, cell somewhere. But in a way we do. Do you understand? We mistreat each other. We devalue one another. We speak badly of another person behind their back or to their face, or we bully somebody, or we get upset with our husband or our wife and we say something to be deliberately hurtful before we could stop it getting out of our mouth. This is what we do. And it comes from this one. Loss of a sense of common parent, lost sense of brotherhood of humankind, loneliness, difficulty to relate, self-centered, power and wealth just for myself, sex for myself. Why? Because I'm trying to make up for the fact I don't have anything. I don't have love. So I need lots of money, I need lots of sex, I need lots of people to dominate, centering on myself. And then that between nations becomes conflict, war, power, land, wealth, all the rest of it. Sometimes you wonder, probably because we don't have a lot of money, we wonder this. We wonder, why do some people need so much money? After a certain point, what can you do with this stuff? What good can it possibly benefit you? It's only a worry. Why do you want so much money? When you got 10 million, why do you need 2 billion? Well, it's just completely absurd. But somehow they do. Do you understand? Well, they should share it with me, shouldn't they? That's the answer. But when you get it, maybe you'll be in trouble. Sometimes I wish, I wish our movement in Europe, I wish we had a lot more money. Wouldn't life be easier then? But then I think, Tim, be a bit careful. Maybe if you have a lot of money, it's problematic. It's not so simple. Because you've got to manage it well then, and not get lazy, not get dependent on others. It's not so simple, is it? Thank God we're not so rich, right? Loss of the third heart, right? Conjugal love. So, because we didn't develop children's heart and brothers and sisters' heart, and because we didn't receive parental love, then actually it's very difficult to have conjugal love. But anyhow, these loves, there is no limitation. You can love, I had one child, so when the second one comes along, I can't love them too, because then that would be betraying my relationship with my first child. That's how it works, isn't it? So you can never love your second child because you already committed yourself to the first one. That's the way it works, isn't it? No, it's not the way it works. No. And then what about other people in general? Of course, if the brothers and sisters' heart, children's heart, parents' heart, the more it's spread out, the more it's given, the better. But conjugal love is completely different. I love my first wife, so I can't love the second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth quite as much. That's a bit more, not so simple. Right? Conjugal love cannot be shared with anyone else except my spouse. If given to others, it is a sin. Our conscience knows this. So this is from those lectures that Father gave. So at that time, where's this? Where's that point? What's at the end of that line? 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 This is not written, right? What's there? Who's there?
Husband and wife.
Husband, right? Or Adam, or whatever. Eve, wife. God. Children, right? So, the place where man and woman meet in love should be the place they meet God. Or God meets them. Or the resting place of God. Or the Sabbath place of God. Or the palace of God. Or the settlement place of God. What is that place? It's where man and woman meet in love in such a way that the love between them is the object partner to this causative love. Right? This is the invisible causative love of God. This is the invisible causative love of God manifested in substance at 90 degrees. Right? Exactly the same quality, but manifested. My love for God manifested in my love for my wife. My wife's love for God manifested in her love for me in substance. To make the place that the love of God comes down to and find its resting place and passes to the next generation. Right? That's the settlement place. That's the home. That's God's home. That's my home. We're in search of our homeland, right? That's the place we're in search of. But actually, I need that place, or I need that place. But who needed the place before I needed it?
God.
God needed it. That's why He made it all in the first place. Because God needed it. God is not complete. God is a relational God. God is a God of Shimjung. He needs a partner. So God designed everything, all the rest of the creation, to make that place. So Father even explains that, doesn't he? He explains that. Everything in the creation wants to get to that place. That's what Father explains. He explains that, all the air, I'm breathing in, right? Breathing in. That all the air molecules, they all want to get into me, and they're going to get in my body. Why into me? Because I can relate to God, right? And where's the place I relate to God most deeply? Is that place. They want to get into me. So which part of me do they want to get into? Father explains, they want to get into the sexual organ. Because they want to be at that meeting place. Everything wants to get to that place. But that place was that God was going to settle and be happy and find His home and complete everything and have His joyful God's day and dance and sing and amazing experience. But Satan took that place and settled it before God and invaded it and invaded sexual love. And the holy place became the defiled place. So the defiled place became then a shameful place. So if you've been watching Hyung Lim's recent sermons, right, he's talking about absolute love all the time, right? Mm. And he's talking about
sex. Good.
Talking about
absolute
penis and vagina.
Penis and vagina, right? Penis and vagina, right? So are we in nice company, everybody?
Yeah.
So it almost feels like he's overdoing it, right? Yeah. But why is he overdoing it? Because when Father passed to the spirit world, he was so shocked, right? So shocked. Didn't expect it. Even though maybe some way it would be rational to expect it. But why? Because 24/7 he's with Father, and Father's the most influential person in his whole life, and he's attending him all the time. And Father went. And then when Father went, what's his expectation? His expectation is that immediately have an experience with him, like he had with his elder brother when he went to the spirit world. Immediately had an experience. 3 months, nothing. Nothing. No spiritual experience. And then first spiritual experience, 5th of December, Father comes in his dream, and it's like he's in a big room, and Father comes into the room and goes around like beating on people. So upset. Fundamentally why? Because they're not talking about absolute sex. And that's the heart and the core of the original divine principle. Because that's the key to everything. That's the fulfillment of human responsibility. That's the start of Chunul Guk. What does Chunul Guk mean? It means the place that two become one. That's the place. That's at the heart and core of all of the principle of creation. Origin, division, two beings, subject, object, give and take action, unite, become one. Where here, where this vertical line, where this intention and love of God becomes manifested in substance. And then the three come together. This one, and this one, they meet here, and then that comes here. Right? That's the fulfillment. That's the object plan for God. Where God, man, woman become one. That's the union. And then out of that union, what happens next? Babies, right? Multiplication. So that's the most important place. Right? So misuse of conjugal love. Fornication and adultery. Greatest sin, worse than murder. Because why is it worse than murder? Because love is the root of life. So taking life is terrible, but not as bad as destroying love. First rule of the kingdom of heaven, or Chunul Guk, keep purity. Keep purity. First rule. Lineage, love, so important, so precious. I remember at first, I had an amazing opportunity one occasion, very, very fortunate. I got a chance to go to Alaska with True Parents. I think it was 91 or 91 maybe. And Father began teaching all this type of content about the four great realms of heart and all these things that didn't speak much about before. And I had the chance to hear about, to hear this content and to understand about first. Father emphasized first love. And when I heard that, I thought I've got to tell people about that. That's so important. I caught more deeply than ever before about purity and its value and the value of lineage, and you know how important that is. Prostitution, things cannot be bought and sold. Things can be bought and sold, but not God's children. Right? So sexual love cannot be bought. It's very interesting. King Jim was quoting from the Bible. Did you see his latest thing? He talked about prostitution being not as bad as just sexual, selling your body being less terrible than indulging in careless activity with one another. And he's not advocating prostitution, please don't misunderstand. Interesting, anyhow. Pornography is an act of prostitution because it exposes the sexual organs and it corrupts young people. So, you know, I didn't know that was happening. I watched this, I don't know if any of the others saw, I watched this Channel 4 news feature on smartphones and kids sharing pictures of their own bodies with one another and being bullied, you know, getting messages from boys asking you as a girl to share intimate pictures of your body with them and keeping asking till they get it. Right? I mean, this is unbelievable stuff, but this is not unbelievable stuff that isn't happening. This is unbelievable stuff that is happening. And it's happening more and more and more. Because every 11, 12, 13-year-old, not everyone, but a lot of them now, have got a phone where they can send things to one another, right? And it's happening. Can't remember what the word is now. They've got a word for it in America. There's a word for that.
Sexting.
Sexting. Yeah, not texting, but sexting. That's it. That's the word. So, the children that are born, right, from the parents, they're the trunk. They appear, they're visible. But the place they come from, the root, is invisible. And it should remain invisible. In other words, you know, this sort of display of pornography and so on, or sending pictures to one another, this is not how it should be. This is the Holy of Holies. This is not to be shown to everybody. But children that are born from it, of course, they're to be shown to everybody. They're a delight, they're a joy. But they came from someplace, right? Where did we come from ultimately? We came from an invisible source. Not even just from the sexual interaction between our father and our mother. We came from the sexual interaction within God. That's also, Jack explained about it, right? God has sexual organs. That's what Father says. God has sexual organs. That's what it says in the OSDP, right? The original substance of divine principle. What a load of nonsense. God doesn't have anything like that. Well, that's nonsense. Isn't that complete and utter nonsense? Of course it's nonsense. No, it's not nonsense. Because everything that exists comes from God, right? So it means within God lies the origin. The origin. What is the origin? The origin is Shinjung. And then God's Shinjung has masculine aspect, feminine aspect. And then, you know, for God to do anything, God's dual characteristics need to interact, centering on his Shinjung. So God has something within God that's invisible, of course. It's invisible, 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 invisible. It's so invisible. But from that invisible, 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 the visible manifestation in the physical world is penis and vagina, right? That's what it is. So, Father says in our bodies, what's the most important part of our body? Of course, clear, isn't it? Heart. No. Sexual organs. God took more care, invested more in that place than in any other place. It's the most important place. But of course we don't know about that. Actually we do, in a sense. Deep, deep within we do know. That's why, you know, like Gunjim says on one level, everybody's thinking about it all the time. Thinking about it all the time. People are thinking about that. It's a very, very important in life. Anyhow, you can understand that the fall led to the misuse of conjugal love. And then also he expressed about homosexuality, incest, very profound. It's unbelievable what people do, because of... These things are all interlinked, of course. So we lost God, then we lost the sense of brothers and sisters. Then what does it mean? It means you can use somebody else, right? So where does sexual abuse happen more frequently? Inside the
family, the whole
family. Inside the family. I mean, can that really be true? Can that really be true? It's true.
Logical.
It's unbelievable, isn't it? So what does that mean? It means it's got to do with this sort of stuff. Right? Unbelievable. But why should that happen? Because some things, it's a lineage matter, you know. So if our great grandparents stepped out of that horrible mess a bit through Hinduism or Buddhism or Christianity or Islam or Judaism or whatever, then you've got a bit free from that stuff. Then you understand you can't do that, right? Judaism, very clear. You can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do the other. All the religions fundamentally clear. You can't fornicate, you can't have adultery, you shouldn't have homosexual relationship, you shouldn't do this, that, the other. And then if you follow it, it's getting better, right? Depending what's in the background. But reality is, we know there's a lot of stuff in the background that shouldn't be there, right? And then also explaining very clearly about homosexuality. How do you explain about it very clearly? You explain about it from the principles of creation. In other words, God made masculine and feminine. So actually that meeting place of love is clarifying this point. So of course people of the same sex are having love with one another because somehow they can't find the right way to have it in the way that God originally intended. They're in search of something. They're getting something out of it. But that's clearly not the way that God originally intended it. It's clearly not. Okay, so that's, I think that's it. Is that it? Oh no, there's one more, beg your pardon. Let me just do this one very fast. Very important, of course. Parental love is unconditional. So when we look in this world to look for the love of God, we find it most deeply and exemplified in the commitment that parents have to children. But however, at the same time, people are immature. So we didn't receive the love of God sufficiently through our own parents. So you get all these problems. I talked about bonding and attachment, right? Unable to love your children, unable to meet the needs of your children. So I was involved at one point in working in a family centre where we assessed families whether they could keep their own children or not. And we ate with them and we watched them playing with their kids in the nursery. And the point of decision was, can they look after their own children, or are they going to damage them so much that the children have to be taken away? And that was because they were so needy, they only know about their own needs, they didn't know about their own children's needs. So they weren't meeting their children's needs, they were looking to the children to meet their own needs. But on some level, do you understand, it was extreme, right? But of course that's nothing to do with me. You know, no one ever threatened to take my children away. But no, it's to do with me too, because I'm also sometimes needy, do you understand? I'm not able to be as I should be. So, you know, this affected a lot. And, you know, worst possible expressions of it: child abuse, physical, emotional, sexual. Original cause, separation from God, the root of all our other problems. If we cannot solve this problem, we cannot solve these problems by laws or by prisons. Sinful man cannot solve alone. He needs the sinless man, Jesus, true parents, Messiah. He needs the change of blood lineage. That's the root solution. But also, of course, to even understand what that's all about, I mean, why would we need to go to Foundation Day if we didn't know why? Because actually, you know, Foundation Day will come and go, and on the surface, the world will not look a very different place. And even on the surface, Tim Miller might not look so different. But what will make it special? It's because I understand what it means to God. I understand what's going on, even though everybody else doesn't. I mean, if it was on the news, if all the celebrities were talking about it, if it was in Hello magazine, it wouldn't be difficult to feel it was important, right? But it won't be, maybe. Maybe not. So, but then we would need to know why, right? It's important. We need to know why. Why did I sit in the back of that room in London, waiting for Father to point at me, going through the most incredible stuff inside myself, trying to make myself ready to get pointed at, right? Because I knew this was very important, right? Of course, you know, maybe that wasn't as difficult to know because someone was choosing my wife, right? That was pretty big stuff. But actually Foundation Day is bigger still. But if we don't know, if we don't understand, that's why we need the, you know, that's why I need the workshop, you need the workshop. That's why we all need to think about this before Foundation Day comes along. Great, thank you.